Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. Today, we begin with the gripping tale of Andromeda 7, a colony on the brink of destruction. As the GRA, a ruthless and predatory alien species, closes in, it seems all hope is lost. But when the Galactic Concordat's military fails, a new force enters the fray: humanity. Led by the daring Colonel Maya Ortega, the human expeditionary force must face impossible odds, using their unorthodox tactics to fight a war that no one thought they could win. Get ready for a roller coaster of emotions as humanity's greatest strengths are revealed on the battlefield. This is a story of unexpected resilience, where every move is unpredictable, and victory doesn't come from playing by the rules but by breaking them. The ground of Andromeda 7 trembled as another Grax bomb fell to the surface with a deafening roar, the shockwave rippling through the underground bunker like the pulse of a dying star. The walls quivered, and dust fell in steady showers from the ceiling. Inside the command room, the weight of the explosion was felt deep in every bone of the officers present. Commander Zilla gripped the control panel with a white-knuckled grip. His three eyes narrowed in sharp focus, a bead of sweat trickling down his forehead. His hand shook ever so slightly as he typed commands into the panel. The once pristine monitors before him now flickered erratically, their lights dull against the dimming atmosphere of the room. Every piece of equipment seemed to echo the strain of the war that had been clawing at them for what felt like eternity. He could feel the panic building in his chest, but there was no time for fear. Commander Zilla, through clenched teeth. The shield grid just collapsed. That was our last line of defense. His voice was thick with frustration, the cold weight of reality sinking in. He had led his people through so much, but now, with the GRA closing in, it felt like everything was slipping through his fingers. Miri, the Maloian tactical officer, with trembling feathers. "We've lost everything. We can't hold out much longer. Not with the GRA at our doorstep." Miri's feathers were slick against her body, a clear sign of stress. Her pale face reflected the fear she couldn't hide, and yet her eyes remained focused on the screen, darting from one alarming report to another. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, as each officer processed the grim news. Vorten officers with scales, Maloian scholars with their fine feathers, and those with tentacles or strange appendages all were frozen in uncertainty. None of them were warriors, and none had the strength to face the GRA, a savage hive species with a brutal instinct to conquer. The GRA did not just conquer, they consumed their enemies, devouring their flesh and analyzing their DNA, adding their essence to the hive. The knowledge of that fate hung heavily in the air, a sense of impending doom tightening its grip. XYX, his voice a frantic whisper. "How many civilians are still on the upper levels?" Miri, checking the reports, her voice trembling. "About 300, mostly Vorten miners and Maloian researchers. The evacuation tunnels are blocked. We can't get them out in time." Zilla, closing his eyes, a silent prayer in his heart. "The GRA will breach us in less than an hour. We fight to the last, but we need help." He stared at the holographic map on the wall, where red dots representing GRA warships slowly closed in on their small colony. The fear and desperation weighed heavy on his shoulders, but he refused to show weakness. There had to be a way out, even if the odds were stacked against them. And then, out of nowhere, the communications panel flickered to life. It crackled and hissed with static, but amidst the noise, a voice cut through the chaos, a voice filled with confidence and authority, and something Zilla hadn't expected: hope. Voice, on transmission. "This is Colonel Maya Ortega of the Human Expeditionary Force. Hold your position. We are inbound. ETA 18 hours. The room went dead silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing, and their gazes snapped to Zilla, who stood frozen, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. A young officer, wide-eyed and confused, leaned toward Zilla. Officer, with disbelief. "Humans? Who are the humans?" Zilla, still reeling from the shock, could only shake his head, trying to piece together what little he knew. Zilla, shaking his head, murmuring to himself. "They are a new species, barely joined the Concordat 5 years ago. Primitive, barely capable of space travel. Their technology is rudimentary, and they have no significant fleet. But they have something we don't: unexpected strength." His words hung in the air, as the officers around him exchanged uncertain glances. The humans, a species barely able to defend themselves, were offering help. Help! The very idea seemed almost absurd, but it was all they had left. Zilla stared at the screen showing the approach of the GRA warships, the feeling of impending doom growing more overwhelming by the second. Could these humans truly make a difference? The room was silent, waiting for a response, as another Grax bomb shook the floor beneath them. Zilla couldn't bear to think of what would happen if the humans failed to arrive in time. But then, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, the thought lingered, what if the humans could change everything? The GRA Supreme Commander stood before the vast command screens, his insect-like form rigid and imposing, his black armor gleaming under the cold lights. His compound eyes narrowed, observing the incoming ships, their silhouettes growing ever clearer in the void of space. The ships appeared crude, cobbled together, and unrefined, far from the sleek, menacing vessels of the GRA. He clicked his mandibles in frustration. The dirt walkers from a backwater system, they dare challenge us, he muttered in disgust, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of conquest. His gaze flickered over the human ships that had dared to enter his territory. They were simple, primitive, built more for mining and transport than for combat. Yet, there was something about their movements that irritated him. Send 2 cruisers to deal with this nuisance, he ordered dismissively. A dark, quiet smirk curled on his face. To him, the humans were nothing more than a momentary distraction, a minor nuisance to be brushed aside before the real fight began. Their ships, with their rough edges and primitive weapons, posed no real threat. He would crush them easily, as he had done with so many before. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship, Colonel Maya Ortega stood before her officers, ready for the mission that could change everything. The air was thick with tension, but there was an undeniable sense of purpose in the way her officers moved. Ortega, a battle-hardened commander with scars etched deep into her face, was the embodiment of relentless determination. Her dark eyes burned with an intensity that spoke of countless battles fought and won. She knew the odds, knew they were almost certainly outmatched, but this was not about playing by the rules. This was about surviving, and sometimes, survival required unpredictability. "We have about 10 minutes before they realize what we're doing," she said with a grin, her voice low and calm despite the enormity of the situation. "We're not going to fight like they expect. Prepare yourselves." Her words were more than a command, they were a promise. Ortega had seen the GRA's brutality, their precision, their overwhelming numbers. But she had also seen what humanity was capable of when cornered. The GRA, with their advanced fleets and tactics, had never fought against something as unpredictable as humans. The humans, however primitive they seemed to the galaxy, had one advantage: their ability to adapt quickly, to fight without following patterns, to break the rules. Ortega pointed at the holographic map in front of her. The GRA were closing in on Andromeda 7, the colony under siege. She had studied the GRA tactics. They followed predictable patterns, aggressive, direct, and ruthless. The GRA were used to following the script, expecting their enemies to do the same. The humans, however, had learned to fight differently, and Ortega was about to teach the GRA just how dangerous that could be. "We'll hit them where it hurts," she said with authority. "The GRA think they know us, but they haven't seen humans fight like this." Her officers nodded, understanding the risks involved, but none of them hesitated. They knew what they were up against, and they knew this would be anything but conventional. They would break the rules, throw out the playbook, and make sure the GRA regretted ever underestimating them. As the GRA cruisers advanced toward the human fleet, their movements calculated, their weapons aimed with deadly accuracy, the human ships did something unexpected: they scattered. Colonel Ortega had anticipated the GRA's predictable tactics, and she had already designed a plan to exploit their rigidity. The GRA would expect the humans to meet them head-on, to engage in a traditional battle, with predictable lines of attack. But the humans did not conform. They broke their formations, splitting into smaller groups, moving unpredictably, weaving in and out of the GRA's targeting systems. The GRA Supreme Commander snarled, watching the humans' erratic movements on his command screens. His initial sense of superiority began to crack. These ships were unlike any he had faced before. They were moving too fast, too erratically, and it was becoming harder to predict their next move. This was not how a battle should unfold. "What are they doing?" he muttered under his breath, his anger rising. The GRA ships, once so confident in their precision and firepower, began to falter. As they tried to recalibrate their weapons to target the humans, they found themselves confused. They expected the humans to fall into the same patterns as every other species they had defeated. But the humans weren't fighting by any pattern at all. They were unpredictable, and that unpredictability was proving to be a far more dangerous weapon than the GRA could have ever imagined. Ortega watched from the command deck of the Relentless, her sharp eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. The GRA were starting to fall into disarray. Their once perfect formations had shattered under the humans' chaotic assault. "We're not fighting by their rules," Ortega said, her voice steady, though there was a thrill in it. "We're fighting to win." The human fleet, though outnumbered, fought with a ferocity the GRA had never experienced. Every movement was calculated to disrupt, to confuse, to break the GRA's sense of control. They attacked where the GRA did not expect, pulling them into traps, exploiting weaknesses, and using their own technology against them. This was not just warfare, it was a dance, one that the GRA were not prepared to lead. As the battle raged on, the GRA Supreme Commander began to realize his mistake. The humans were no longer just a nuisance. They were becoming a true threat. He had underestimated them, and now, their unpredictability was unraveling everything he had once taken for granted. The GRA Supreme Commander growled, a sound deep and unsettling. His forces, once so confident, were now struggling to hold their ground. The humans were not just a nuisance. They were a force to be reckoned with, chaotic, reckless, and unyielding. And Colonel Ortega smiled, knowing that the GRA had just learned a valuable lesson. They had thought they could crush the humans easily. But the truth was far more dangerous. Humanity's unpredictability was its greatest weapon, and it had only just begun. The human fleet had arrived in orbit around Andromeda 7, but instead of following the traditional tactics that the GRA were expecting, they deployed an entirely unexpected strategy. Colonel Maya Ortega knew that time was against them, and that to survive, they would need to break every rule the GRA had set for war. With no time to waste and no room for error, the humans struck fast and relentlessly, their unpredictability becoming their greatest asset. "We're going in hot." "Stay unpredictable," Colonel Ortega's voice crackled through the calms, her tone steady and unyielding. Her orders were clear, and the entire fleet moved with precision, despite the chaos surrounding them. The GRA had focused all their attention on the colony's surface, believing that it would be their final victory, but they had failed to anticipate one crucial factor: humanity's ability to adapt and fight with ruthless cunning. As the human forces descended through the cold void of space, their ships cut through the atmosphere, moving like shadows. They were not here for a grand battle in the skies, their goal was far more insidious. The GRA Supreme Commander had expected a direct confrontation, a battle where the superior firepower of his fleet would crush the humans in mere minutes. But the humans weren't interested in playing by those rules. Instead, they launched small, rapid attack ships, designed not for space battles, but for quick, devastating strikes. These ships, seemingly unremarkable compared to the majestic GRA war vessels, were nimble and fast, slipping through the GRA defenses with ease. They flew with the precision of a hawk swooping in on its prey, entering the colony's atmosphere at breakneck speeds. They were designed to get in, strike fast, and disappear before the enemy could even respond. It was a tactic that caught the GRA completely off guard. As the attack ships descended toward the planet's surface, they approached Andromeda 7 with a grim purpose. They flew low, below the reach of the GRA's orbital sensors, skimming the skies like ghosts. Their sleek, angular frames blended into the swirling clouds of dust and debris left behind by the GRA's previous bombings. The ships did not come in straight lines, they moved erratically, as though their pilots were performing an intricate dance with the storm clouds. The goal was simple: to confuse, to disorient, and to strike before the enemy even had a chance to react. On the ground, the human soldiers, clad in makeshift armor scavenged from old mining suits and whatever materials they could find, moved swiftly through the abandoned mining tunnels and maintenance shafts that ran deep beneath the surface of Andromeda 7. They were small, agile, and silent, moving like shadows through the wreckage of the once bustling colony. Their faces were hidden behind visors, their hands gripped tightly around weapons that had been modified to suit the unforgiving nature of this desperate war. The tunnels, once used by the colony's miners and workers, now became the perfect hiding places for the human soldiers. They knew these tight corridors would give them the advantage: stealth over brute force. The GRA forces, overwhelmed by the vastness of the colony and their need to maintain a constant presence across multiple sectors, had not expected the humans to infiltrate these forgotten paths. In the dim, flickering light of the mining tunnels, the humans moved quickly and silently, their footfalls barely making a sound. They used every trick they had learned during their long history of survival and war, blending into the shadows, staying out of sight, and attacking only when they had the upper hand. Their tactics were simple, but effective: strike quickly, incapacitate the enemy, and then vanish into the darkness. It was a strategy built on the unpredictability of human nature, and it was one that the GRA could not prepare for. As the GRA soldiers patrolled the tunnels, expecting only the chaos of the GRA assault, they were blindsided by the humans' ruthless efficiency. A soldier's head would snap back as an electrified stun shot hit him from the shadows, incapacitating him in seconds. Another would be taken down by a quick, well-placed blow that left him unconscious and immobile. The humans struck fast, like predators moving through a herd, knowing exactly where to strike, how to do the most damage, and how to leave without leaving a trace. The GRA Supreme Commander, still watching from orbit, began receiving multiple reports from his forces on the ground. His expression twisted into one of growing frustration and confusion. GRA Supreme Commander, furious, clicking his mandibles. How are they getting in? They should be trapped. His anger was palpable. The GRA had meticulously planned every aspect of their assault on the colony. Their forces were overwhelming, their firepower devastating. Yet, the humans had infiltrated their ranks without firing a single shot, slipping through the cracks like water through a sieve. He had underestimated them, and now, that error would cost him dearly. The GRA Supreme Commander barked orders, sending more troops to secure every possible entry point to the tunnels, but it was already too late. The humans had created chaos in their wake, moving faster than the GRA could track, disabling their machines, and forcing them to adjust to an enemy they could not predict. The humans were not fighting by the rules. They were not following any conventional strategy. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and it was this very unpredictability that allowed them to throw the GRA into disarray. Each human soldier moved like a ghost, attacking when and where they were least expected, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. It was a battle of wits, and the humans were winning. Back on the human flagship, Colonel Maya Ortega watched the chaos unfold on her command screen. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. The GRA had always been a predictable enemy, relying on their strength and overwhelming force. But the humans were showing them something far more dangerous, that sometimes, the most unexpected moves were the most devastating. "We are not bound by your rules," Ortega muttered, her eyes hardening with focus. "We'll make our own." The battle had only just begun, but one thing was clear: the GRA were not prepared for the storm that humanity was about to unleash. The night sky over Andromeda 7 was thick with smoke, and the air trembled with the aftershocks of each blast. The sound of distant explosions reverberated across the barren landscape, filling the control room with an eerie hum as Commander Zilla stood, transfixed, before the expansive windows. Outside, chaos unfolded as the human forces began their first major offensive. He had thought they were no more than an inconvenience, a distraction sent by the Concordat. But what he was witnessing now, through the lenses of his station, shattered that assumption completely. The human attack was a storm of violence, swift, brutal, and efficient. It was as though they had studied their enemies in a way the GRA had never expected. The humans attacked from the hidden depths of the mining tunnels, their movements coming out of the shadows like the tip of a blade cutting through the night. Ortega's forces had no interest in taking their time or staging conventional assaults. They tore through the GRA's defenses like wild animals, forcing their way into the colony's vital supply lines, systematically dismantling the infrastructure the GRA had worked so hard to build. Zilla's eyes widened as he watched a group of human soldiers emerge from a maintenance shaft, moving with terrifying speed and precision. Their makeshift armor glinted under the dim light, showing signs of wear and tear, but it didn't matter. They were a machine, organized, relentless. With the grace of shadows, they spread out into the darkness, laying traps and ambushing any GRA soldiers they encountered. There was no hesitation in their movements. They attacked without fear, without remorse. The GRA forces, who prided themselves on their ability to anticipate and control, were thrown into complete disarray. Zilla, his gills turning a pale shade of green from the strain, muttered under his breath, completely stunned by the humans' unrelenting assault. He had seen many species fight, each with their unique style and methods, but nothing prepared him for this. These humans, they fight with a kind of desperation I've never seen before, Zilla muttered, his voice low, almost reverent. They don't follow patterns. They're chaotic, reckless, but effective. His words barely registered with the officers around him, who were too preoccupied with the unfolding disaster to comprehend the depth of their commander's realization. What had seemed like an easy victory, a conquest that would take little more than brute force, was turning into a nightmarish battle. The GRA's advanced tactics had failed to predict the human savage unpredictability. Every trap they set, every line of defense they established, was crumbling under the weight of human aggression. A loud explosion rumbled from below the surface, sending a shockwave through the control room. GRA soldiers, who were patrolling the supply lines, scattered in every direction as the ground trembled beneath their feet. Human soldiers had infiltrated their supply depot, blowing it sky high. Smoke and fire billowed from the craters left by the explosions, cutting through the night like a jagged wound. Zilla could hear the faint sound of human battle cries carry through the calms, the chaotic symphony of their victory growing louder with each passing moment. The GRA Supreme Commander, still orbiting above, barked orders in frustration. His forces, so accustomed to dominating their enemies with brute strength and predictable tactics, were being overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of the humans' assaults. The GRA, with their rigid strategies, were left stumbling, unable to adapt fast enough to the rapid shifts in the human tactics. Zilla could feel the pressure building in the control room as reports flooded in from all sectors. More explosions. More ambushes. More GRA forces retreating in disarray. Each victory came at a high cost, but the humans didn't hesitate. They pushed forward relentlessly, dismantling every GRA position with precision, even as their numbers dwindled. The chaos was overwhelming, their strategy seemed completely unorthodox, yet it worked with deadly efficiency. Zilla turned to his officers, eyes still wide in disbelief. He had seen wars, seen battles fought by species far older and more advanced than humanity. But never had he witnessed anything like this. "We've never faced anything like this," he said, his voice tight with awe and fear. "It's like they're hunting us, like predators." His officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, unable to fully comprehend what had just been described. To them, humanity had always been a species that was still finding its footing in the stars, clumsy and unrefined compared to the ancient civilizations of the Concordat. But now, they were facing a force unlike any they had expected. The GRA's calculated precision, based on logic and ruthless efficiency, was no match for the raw, instinctual ferocity of the humans. In the midst of the chaos, Colonel Maya Ortega stood at the helm of the attack, her eyes cold and determined. From the command deck of her ship, she observed the battle unfold below. She had planned for chaos. It was what humanity was best at. Her soldiers were not bound by the rules of conventional warfare, they were creatures of pure instinct, honed by centuries of survival against the odds. She had given them one simple command: strike fast, strike hard, and strike unpredictably. Each human soldier, no matter their rank, fought with a singular purpose: survival. There was no room for hesitation, no time for second guessing. They moved through the GRA positions with purpose and ferocity. Every battle cry was a declaration that they would not go down without a fight. The GRA had underestimated humanity, and now, it was too late for them to adjust. Zilla, standing in the control room, felt the weight of that reality pressing down on him. He had thought victory was inevitable. But now, as the GRA forces scrambled, desperately trying to regain control, he saw the truth: humanity was not to be underestimated. Their strength lay not in their technology, nor in their numbers. It lay in their ability to fight without rules, without fear, and without mercy. As the battle raged on, Zilla realized that the GRA were facing something they had never encountered before: an enemy that could not be predicted. The humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting with everything they had, everything they were. And they were winning. The air inside the colony's storage rooms was thick with dust, the dim light from emergency generators casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The humans, once a force of chaos and unpredictability, now found themselves standing side by side with beings they had never fought alongside before. The Maloian aliens, a species known for their peaceful nature, stood before them, an unlikely partnership forged in the heat of battle. At the far end of the room, Trill, the Maloian elder, raised a hand, his feathers rustling softly as he extended his telepathic reach. His species, pacifists by nature, had never participated in combat, but the desperate situation had driven them to offer their unique abilities to the humans. With a single thought, the entire group felt his presence in their minds, calm, powerful, and unwavering. Trill, telepathically. We sense the GRA moving toward you. We can help you see them before they strike. The words filled their minds like a whisper on the wind. For a moment, there was only silence, then the sharp, heightened awareness of the humans who had now become attuned to the Maloian elder's telepathic frequency. Lieutenant Chen, who had fought in battles across galaxies, was the first to understand the magnitude of this gift. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and relief as the sense of clarity washed over her. She nodded, acknowledging the elder's offer with a subtle smile, a rare moment of peace amid the chaos of war. Chen, smiling. You've got to love it when a plan comes together. It was not just a plan anymore. It was a union, an unexpected alliance that fused the Maloians' telepathic insight with the humans' brutal efficiency in combat. The synergy between them was immediate. With each passing second, the humans learned to trust the Maloians' guidance, moving as one with their telepathic maps of the battlefield. As Chen and her team prepared for their next strike, her mind raced through the possibilities. She could feel the Maloian telepathic link sharpening her awareness. Each GRA soldier's movements were revealed in her mind like a glowing map. Their positions, the twists and turns of their patrol routes, even their intentions, became clear in a way she had never experienced. The world around her seemed to slow, the danger more visible than ever before. She looked around at her team, now fully in sync with the Maloian insights. Their previously erratic and unpredictable movements became deliberate, precise, guided by something more than instinct alone. Lieutenant Chen was no longer just relying on her own military strategies, she had an entire new perspective at her disposal. The humans had always fought fiercely, but now they fought with the advantage of foresight. Chen, pointing to a map. We'll flank them here. The GRA will be expecting a diversion from the east, but they won't see this coming from the west. Let's move quickly. The Maloian telepathic link gave them an upper hand, enabling them to read the GRA's next moves before they even happened. It was like seeing the future unfold, a future that had once been veiled in uncertainty. For the first time, the humans were no longer flying blind. Every move, every decision was a calculated risk, but it was one they could now make with a certain degree of certainty. As Chen's team began their strike, it was as though they had become shadows, moving fluidly and silently, in complete harmony with the Maloians' telepathic guidance. Each of their movements was perfectly synchronized, humans operating as though they had always known the alien species, not as strangers but as equals. The GRA, who had relied on their hive mind tactics, suddenly found themselves outmatched. They could feel the humans coming, but they couldn't anticipate their strikes. The coordinated attack threw them into complete disarray. Trill, telepathically. They are confused. They know something is wrong, but they cannot pinpoint it. The GRA's once precise movements became clumsy, their formation cracking under the pressure of the humans' unrelenting assault. The Maloian telepathy allowed the humans to move seamlessly, as if they shared a single mind. When a GRA soldier was about to strike, a small telepathic nudge from Trill's mind diverted their attention elsewhere, buying the human soldiers precious seconds to strike. At the same time, Chen was coordinating the assault. Her mind working in tandem with the Maloian telepaths, she could see the GRA's formation collapse in real time, each unit breaking away from its command structure in a panic. The GRA Supreme Commander, watching from above, could do little to prevent the collapse. GRA Supreme Commander. How are they anticipating our moves? They are not supposed to be this effective. The humans had taken the GRA by surprise, using a combination of their own guerrilla tactics and the Maloians' insight into the enemy's strategy. What was once a battle of brute force had now become a game of wits, and the GRA were losing. On the ground, the human soldiers, following Chen's lead, executed ambush after ambush. Their sudden strikes and disruptive tactics destabilized the GRA forces. The GRA, who had relied on sheer power and overwhelming numbers, now found themselves fighting an enemy that was constantly shifting, constantly changing its approach. Zilla, watching the chaos unfold from his command center, could only watch in awe as the once dominant GRA forces were systematically outmaneuvered. His mind raced as he processed the situation. He had never seen an enemy fight this way, chaotic, unpredictable, yet somehow organized in its unpredictability. The humans, it seemed, had mastered the art of war not through superior weapons or numbers, but through something deeper, a relentless drive to win, no matter the cost. Zilla, muttering in disbelief. They fight with a hunger we do not understand, it's like they thrive on chaos. With each strike, each ambush, the humans, alongside their new Maloian allies, pushed the GRA further back. The GRA Supreme Commander, once so confident, now found himself facing an enemy that was not just physically resilient, but mentally unpredictable. The Maloian telepathy, combined with the humans' brutal determination, was turning the tide of the battle. For the first time, Zilla began to see the humans not as an obstacle to be destroyed, but as a force that could potentially change the course of the war. They were no longer the underdogs. They were a force to be reckoned with, a species that, against all odds, had risen from nothing and fought with the ferocity of predators. As the battle raged on, the humans and Maloian forces seemed unstoppable, their combined strength proving that they were more than just allies, they were a force that could shake the foundation of the galaxy. The turning point had arrived, and the GRA were beginning to realize that they had severely underestimated humanity. The final confrontation on Andromeda 7 was inevitable, but the way it unfolded was nothing short of extraordinary. The GRA, relentless in their pursuit of destruction, had launched a full assault on the colony's last line of defense, the fusion reactors. If these reactors were destroyed, the entire planet would be rendered uninhabitable, a catastrophe that would wipe out thousands, maybe millions. It was the ultimate tipping point, the last, desperate stand for the colony's survival. As the GRA forces surged forward, their black armored forms advancing under the cover of night, they believed victory was in their grasp. Their weapons were powerful, their tactics flawless, yet there was one thing they had miscalculated: the humans. Inside the command room, Colonel Maya Ortega stood with her squad, preparing for the final assault. The tension in the air was thick, and the weight of their mission was pressing down on them. She stared at the screen displaying the approaching GRA troops, her eyes narrowed in determination. Ortega, in a tense voice. They've underestimated us. They think we fight fair. Time to show them otherwise. There was no room for hesitation. They had already crossed that line. The human forces, now a mix of soldiers and miners, had no other choice but to strike with everything they had. The fusion reactor was their only target, and they would not allow the GRA to reach it. Chen, ever the leader on the front lines, raised her fist as she led her team into the reactor's core, her eyes fierce, her voice like thunder. Chen, leading the charge. For the colony. With that, they charged, a force of nature descending upon the GRA's defenses. Their weapons were not conventional. Mining drills, plasma cutters, and terraforming explosives, tools of industry, now transformed into instruments of destruction. Humans had a unique ability to adapt. When faced with seemingly impossible odds, they didn't look to their standard arsenal. Instead, they adapted their environment, making it work for them in ways the GRA could never predict. These mining tools, made for breaking through rock and earth, now tore through GRA defenses like butter, ripping apart fortified structures and creating breaches where there had been none before. The humans' method was brutal, there was no elegance in it, no finesse. There was only raw power, raw survival. It was chaotic. It was unpredictable. It was humanity's greatest strength. And the GRA, with all their strategy, could not keep up. They had expected the humans to fight by their own rules of honor and protocol. What they received was fury, a relentless assault on all things they knew. Ortega, on comms, firmly. We're going to finish this. No more retreats. The moment those words left her lips, the human squad exploded into action. Explosions lit up the night, GRA soldiers scattered in panic, their lines shattered. The humans fought like caged animals, ferocious and unstoppable, every movement fueled by the primal need to survive. They were not fighting for honor or for glory, they were fighting for the future of Andromeda 7. As mining tools turned into deadly weapons, the GRA's forces began to falter. The humans' unpredictability had caught them off guard. Their systematic, precise war tactics, honed over centuries, were no match for the chaos the humans brought. Terraforming explosives detonated with a deafening roar, bringing down entire sections of GRA fortifications. The GRA, accustomed to their rigid ways, now faced an enemy that refused to conform. The humans knew exactly how to exploit every weakness, every blind spot in the GRA's tactics. Then came the final blow. With a massive explosion, the GRA forces were obliterated. The explosion reverberated through the colony, throwing GRA soldiers into disarray. Their final assault had failed. The fusion reactors were safe, and with them, the survival of the colony. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the GRA Supreme Commander, watching from orbit, received the terrible news: the humans had done the impossible. Commander Zilla, standing in awe as he watched the chaos unfold, could barely believe his eyes. The humans had fought with a recklessness and determination that no one could have anticipated. They had fought with courage, yes, but also with something deeper. Something the GRA could not comprehend. Zilla, in awe. They did the impossible, with their unpredictability and will to fight. The GRA had underestimated humanity, assuming they were just another primitive species with no place in galactic warfare. But the humans had proven them wrong. They had fought not only with their bodies, but with their minds, and most importantly, with the unbreakable will to protect their home. As the dust began to settle, the GRA forces retreated. What had once been a surefire victory was now a catastrophic defeat for them. Andromeda 7, though scarred, stood firm thanks to the humans. Aftermath and reflection. The colony, though battered and broken, had survived. The GRA, their forces scattered and in disarray, were forced to retreat. The humans, though exhausted, had accomplished the unthinkable. The Galactic Concordat, with its technologically superior fleets and armies, had lost. And the humans, with their unpredictable, reckless style, had won. Colonel Ortega stood among the ruins of the fusion reactor complex, her arm in a makeshift sling, reflecting on the battle. Her team had lost many, and their victory had come at a high price. But it was worth it. The colony was safe. Ortega, quietly, to her team. Sometimes, the best way to fight is by breaking every rule. The humans had done the impossible. They had saved Andromeda 7, and in doing so, had changed the course of the war. The Vorten commander Zilla watched as the humans began their departure, their tactics far different from anything the Concordat had ever seen. He felt a deep respect for them. What they lacked in numbers and technology, they made up for in unshakable resolve and the willingness to sacrifice everything. Zilla, writing a report. We need them. Their methods may be unconventional, but they have saved us. I formally request human military advisors for all Concordat defense forces. The GRA Supreme Commander, reeling from his defeat, ordered his fleet to retreat. He knew that for the first time in his long career, the GRA had been defeated. The humans had shown no mercy, and in the end, it was their unpredictability and their will to fight that had won them the battle. The camera pulled back as Zilla looked at the colony, now in the early stages of recovery. The survivors, humans and aliens alike, worked together, repairing what had been broken. It was a testament to what they had achieved, a new kind of alliance, one that combined chaos and order, war and peace. Together, they had faced the GRA, and together, they had won. The humans, scarred but unbroken, walked into a future where they would never again be underestimated. Their legacy, their chaotic brilliance, would now be part of the galaxy's history, a history where anything was possible if you were willing to fight for it. Thank you for joining us on this epic adventure through the stars here at HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Store. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe for more thrilling, action-packed adventures. Your support helps us keep these stories alive, and we can't wait to bring you more intergalactic battles and emotional triumphs. Remember, the fight isn't over. There's always a new challenge ahead in the vast unknown. Stay curious, stay brave, and never forget the greatest weapon we have is humanity. Until next time, keep watching and keep dreaming of the stars. See you in the next adventure.